Good morning, 7th grade. Today we are going to be talking about more insects. And I know you guys are just loving talking about insects, so let's just jump right into it here. And so let's get started. Now, talking about insect bodies. Now, specifically today we are talking about 3 different parts of the insect that all have to do with just the head of the insect. And so we talked about the general stuff in last class. Today's class we're going to get a bit more specific, so let's see what's going on here. Now we're going to talk about the headgear, and so everything we're talking about today is all around the head of the insect. And so we can see some things here, and the first thing we're going to talk about is actually what exactly is going on here. Now it says, although an insect's eyes are immovable, they cannot move their eyes around. They cannot look from side to side like we can. And its head only has limited movement. Its bulging compound eyes enable it to see several directions at the same time. And so that's what's going on with these crazy looking eyes here on this fly. This texture right here, let me just bring out my pointer. This texture is actually a bunch of smaller, tinier eyes. And you can see here, if you take this eye and you were to zoom in on it, you could see you got this hexagonal type structure to it, and you can see all the different parts of it, and it's really interesting to think about how God chose to create it this way instead of giving them movable eyes like you'd see with like a lot of other different animals. Now, all the small sections of its eyes send signals to its brain through the optic nerve. Now, we also have an optic nerve in our bodies, but it's really interesting to think about insects. They also have optic nerves. And the whole purpose of that optic nerve is just to make sure that all of the crazy signals that come from these gigantic compound eyes are able to be processed properly by the brain. And the insect's brain, in case you did not know, is very small, which means it's not very intelligent, but it can still process every single thing it sees. And there's even some theories out there to say that they can see colors and things that we cannot see. And so that's something really interesting to think about. But I would much rather have my eyes than have those crazy looking compound eyes right there. Let's keep on moving here, and we're going to talk about sensors. Now, there are many different types of sensors on your insect's head, and we talked about one already. We had the compound eyes. Let's look at more here. The antennae are one of the insect's most useful sensory organs. And so, if you know what antennae are, they look like this, and I hope you guys know what they are. They usually come out the top of the head of a certain insect. And there are many different types of antennae here, and they come in many different shapes and sizes. And so, just to look at this picture down here, butterfly antenna, and then you have mosquito antenna over here. You got a beetle's antenna, you got the ant's antenna, the fly, the dragonfly, and all these different types of antenna that you can see on the screen are very important, and they all do a different purpose. And so those different purposes are made specifically for that insect. Now, used mostly to feel things out. And so the antennas have a very special sensory organ on them as well, but the actual antenna itself is mostly used for touch. And so we'll get into that right now and see what goes on here. Now, that sensory organ is actually given the name the sensilla. And this is what a sensilla is. Basically, these are small hair-like structures that give insects different information about their surroundings. So looking here, you can see this fly is covered in these hair-like structures, and we would call those sensilla. And those sensilla are giving it tons of information about everything around it right now. Same thing happens here with the antenna of this ant, which we'll get into right now, and it says they can touch, taste, smell, and even be used for hearing. So all these sensilla here are very important to make sure that your insect can get all the information it needs to survive in general. So do I have something after this? Yes, I do. Many antennae have sensilla on them. And so The antenna itself is mostly used for just like touching things, but the actual more complex senses all rely heavily on the sensilla. So it's very important to keep that in mind and to write this stuff down here. It can do a lot of different things. And right here we got the antenna of the ant. It's covered in these sensilla. From there, we look at the mouths of an insect. And so these mouths are not very appealing, obviously, but they have very, very important purposes. You see even the sensilla on this right here, this little hairs and things like that coming out. Now, insects have different mouths based on what it needs to eat. And so, your mouth on a certain insect is going to look drastically different if it ate something like plants than it would if it ate other insects or it had to eat wood all the time, like we talked about in yesterday's video. Now, the labrum is the name for its upper lip, and so the upper lip of our insect is called the labrum. The bottom lip, however, is called the labium, and it serves a certain purpose. Well, all of the insect actually serves a certain purpose, but the labium has a pair of palps in it. Now, these palps are used to feel and taste its food, and so the labium, or the lower lip of the insect, is actually doing the heavy lifting when it comes to feeling the food and then tasting it as well. And so that's a really, really big part of this insect. Now, from there, we're going to talk a little more about mouths. And you can see we got some diagrams at the bottom here. I love diagrams. And you can actually see the labrum and the labium. Oh, let me just keep the cursor out of the way. Maybe it'll go away. Couple seconds. Okay, yes. On this right here. And so you can pause and you can actually draw this diagram yourself. It is a good diagram. Now it says here insects have side-to-side jaws called mandibles. And you can see on the left side there is a little mandible portion right there in its mouth. And so they kind of close in on the food side to side. And then they also have right here maxilla. And those maxilla help also in chewing up the food. And so the maxilla and the mandible of your insect is going to look drastically different based on what kind of food it needs to eat. And so if the food is trying to get away, your mandibles might have piercing qualities to them. Or if your food is stationary, your mandibles might not really need to do much other than just break down the food. So go to Google Classroom now, and I want you to do the assignment that I have for you there. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Stay healthy and stay happy. I will see you guys tomorrow.